Tired of outdated marketing advice aimed at the industrial and manufacturing space? My name is Selim Malouf. Join me and my co-host Chris Carolyn as we deliver candid insights from growth-minded leaders, helping you drive results and tackle modern challenges. Cut through the noise to get no-nonsense expertise. Welcome to the Manufacturing Marketing Show. Joe Sullivan is an industrial marketing consultant of 10 plus years and co-founder of Gorilla 76. In addition to co-leading the agency, Joe serves as the company business development lead and consults Gorilla's clients on both sales and marketing strategy. Much of his time is dedicated to crafting thought leadership content in the Industrial Marketing Learning Center and hosting the Manufacturing Executive, a growth strategy podcast for manufacturing leaders. Outside of work, Joe likes to cook, watch his Green Bay Packers, and chase his 3 crazy kids, Grace, Jack, and Charlie, with his wife of 10 years, Julie. Joe is a Milwaukee native, transplanted in St. Louis, and a dual degree graduate, Business and Art, of Washington University in St. Louis. Joe, thank you for being a guest on the show, and welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Both Chris and I have worked with you, Joe, and with Gorilla 76 on multiple occasions. And we're very familiar with the work you do. But for those who are not, can you give us, like the elevator pitch for Gorilla 76?
Yeah, sure. So what we really do is help B2B manufacturing organizations build revenue-focused marketing programs. So kind of simply stated, and our client base is really kind of the whole ecosystem around manufacturing, including OEMs, contract manufacturers, technology companies that are serving those types of businesses, et cetera. So.
And I have to admit, a lot of my education around industrial marketing has come either directly from your content on LinkedIn or from content from one of the team at Gorilla. Gorilla has done a great job, illustrating your process, describing how you work, and educating on LinkedIn. And I can talk about myself, but I kind of use you as a measuring stick. If we're doing as good as Gorilla, then we're doing good.
So I appreciate that.
We've been very deep in the industrial marketing space. We've been both in-house and outside, and the shift there is a shift happening, and people need to be ready for it. Joe, you wrote a very interesting article about the new trends and the changes that are happening in industrial marketing, and we'll be sharing that article in the show notes. But we felt that it's very important for people to know about it, and we will be discussing a lot of these pointers in this episode. One big thing that both Chris and I emphasize in our work here at Conveying Your Message is recognizing that the power is shifting from the seller to the buyer. And that's something that a lot of people in the industrial space are struggling with accepting. I was hoping you can talk to us about your experience with Gorilla and talking with these customers, and how are people, taking this shift from the seller to the buyer?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been at Gorilla, been working with manufacturers specifically for 12, 13 years or so, and I feel like I've witnessed firsthand kind of the snowballing of what you're describing here, where you look back at a decade and a half ago, and I think it was a lot of manufacturing organizations, first of all, are just very sales driven organizations. They rely a lot on trade shows and outbound outreach, whether it's email or cold outreach, et cetera. And I think what's happened over the last 1 to 2 decades is the amount of communication happening has become overwhelming for people. Our guards are up. I said this recently to a few people, but my 9-year-old daughter asked me not too long ago, a couple months ago, who spam risk was, because that person calls me so often. And it's just, I think, there's so much communication coming at us. And then you pair that with just the sheer availability of information that's available to us and at our fingertips. And you think about how you go about buying things that, require It's not the type of stuff you buy at the checkout line at the grocery store. You grab a candy bar because you're hungry on your way out. You think about in your personal life buying a computer or a car or a house, right? Like there's a research process that's involved there, and there's you're going to different sources to try to make sure you're making the right decisions, and a lot of that's happening before you ever walk into a store and talk to a salesperson. And really the exact same thing is happening in the B2B world, and it's probably no surprise to anybody, but a lot of companies don't really think about it that way. They just kind of have continued to blast sort of inward focused messaging at the outside world, at the people they're trying to reach. Tends to be real sales centric and focused on themselves. And the reality is, your audience doesn't want to hear that in most cases, at least not until they are in a buy cycle, until they have a need, and then they're going to be out there looking. And so I think what this comes down to is like the work to be done from a marketing perspective is to be able to build trust and awareness now and at scale and in front of the right people, so that when your audience bit by bit starts to get triggered because they're expanding their facility or because their machinery is reaching end of life or whatever that trigger is, they already know who you are. There's trust in you as an expert. They recognize your brand name, and you're the one they go to. And so that's I think sort of, as you think about this shift from seller to buyer, we need to arm your potential customers, your future customers, with information that's helpful to them, that addresses the problems they're experiencing in their world, that helps them think differently about how to get to outcomes they're trying to get to, rather than just doing things the same way they've been doing it for 30 years and the generation before them and them has been doing things. So that's your job. Like, I think I hear people like Marcus Sheridan and Joe Pulizzi and some of the big content marketing names over the years just talk about, make yourself like a media company. Think of yourself as a media company, the best one out there for your specific audience niche. And if you do that, now you're empowering the people you need to reach, and simultaneously, building trust in your expertise.
We're fans of Marcus Sheridan and the Ask You Answer here.
Oh, I know you guys are. Yeah, absolutely.
Become the number one resource in your space is one sentence that every prospect that we work with will be hearing from us, because we know it works. And it's interesting how, in a world where, the Amazons of the world and e-commerce shopping and, now social media platforms are working on, shopping platforms, there's these expectations from the consumer space that you can look up information, compare and contrast features and benefits and pricing and availability. These are the same people that are turning around into the B2B space and saying, no, we need to have a long sales cycle. We need to, gate all the information. If you want any information about pricing or availability, you need to call us, or heaven forbid, be in a meeting room together just so we can disclose it. Why is that disconnect?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you're right. It's like, you think about the way you want to experience. Let's come back to the analogy of, say, buying a computer or a car or whatever. Like, how frustrating is it when you're trying to figure out what something's going to cost, and if you do it this way versus this way, and you can't get that information without going to a salesperson. It's so frustrating. And like you said, Selim, you turn around and then do the exact same thing to your customers just because we're in the business world now. It's silly, right? It really is. Why that is, I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I think it's probably just largely rooted in people doing stuff the way they've been doing things for years. And I think there's also, as far as, when it comes to pricing specifically, I think there's just this general fear everybody has about talking about money. So coming back to Marcus Sheridan, I know that's one thing he talked about, and it really resonated with me many years ago when I first read They Ask You Answer, is like, just talk about money. Like, that's what people care about it, right? Regardless of whether you're selling a widget for $10 or you're selling a $1 million piece of CapEx machinery, like, people care about price, and it's going to be part of the conversation. So, and you might not be able to list that this thing costs $953,000 and, whatever sense, but like you can still talk about, if you make an investment at this level versus this level and what scenarios make sense for that. And here are ways where, total cost of ownership, right? You invest here, you might be able to keep this piece of machinery for 20 years, as opposed to if you invest down here and it might only last 10 years. And so I think these are all the things that your customers care about and want to know. So, we're advocating, and they're going to figure it out somehow, right? Whether they're on the call with you or getting it from competitors. And that's probably the worst case scenario, is they're going and getting the same information from competitors before they get it from you. And now your competitors are the ones in conversation with them. So I think you think about how transparent can you afford to be, and just be that transparent.
Yeah. And probably more transparent than you think you can afford to be in most cases, right?
Yeah. You have more to lose by not being transparent than you have to, you have more to gain than you do to lose, is what I guess I mean to say, by sharing information. Like the opportunity cost of not being transparent and sharing that information, I think far outweighs the risk.
Yeah. And that's where like this understanding of the shift and the control of the buyer is so important, because if you're keeping it, even if you manage to keep this information from a competitor, which you usually don't, they usually know how much everything costs and all the information you try to keep secret. They usually know that. But let's say they don't, and you keep it from them this one entity, you're keeping it from 100 of your possible customers at the same time. And so I think it's interesting, like, I'll just touch on your second point a little bit, because it's always been a thing where you need to understand who makes up the buying committee, right? But now it's that much more important, because each person, on the buying committee has this power that they never had before. So if you're not talking to all of them in this way that we're talking about, it's not like you can just set the sales meeting and then whoever needs to be a part of it's just going to show up. That's not how it works anymore. So I think that one's, fairly easier to understand, until you get to number 3 here. It's like, okay, we've got all these people involved now. How in the world are we to create value, enough value to where they're paying attention to us and building trust, with us without meeting in person, right? So take us through that bullet.
Yeah. And I'll hit briefly on the one before it, just as a lead into it. When you think about, like, something I say often is, like, if you're talking to procurement, you're already too late. And the reason for that is it's usually, unless your product is really a true commodity that has no differentiation and is, could be interchangeable with anything else out there. The reality is that the person you need to reach is probably some engineer or plant manager or maintenance person or somebody on the shop floor who's experiencing a problem or trying to achieve something in their world. And that's the person whose attention you really need to earn. And that's the person you need to be an advocate for you, so that they can go to procurement and explain why they need to pay 20% more for your product because of, the impact it's going to have on the business. Otherwise, you're just going to get commoditized. So I think, that's kind of probably the main point I'd say comes out of that, that number 2, which is to be able to understand who makes up the buying committee and be able to reach the right people. And then leading into number 3, which is what you've asked me about, Chris, which is to be able to create value to earn trust, attention, and trust. It's with that person, right? It's with that most influential or those most influential people in the buying process. Because for a lot of you that are selling, some kind of complex solution through a consultative sales process, you're touching procurement and some engineer and some plant manager and a CFO and, some automation engineer or whatever. There's probably some group of human beings that are all weighing in on a large buying decision, and each of them kind of cares about different things in a lot of cases, like in their own job role. The person in purchasing and the CFO are focused on the budget and, like, building a reliable partner network and things like that. Whereas the person who's operating a piece of machinery just needs the machine to work and to be able to mitigate downtime and all this. So I think, if it's just important to dial in on who is really going to be the most influential one, somebody who's early enough in that buying process that, we could build advocacy through them. And then it's, how do we create value for them, right? Like if it is a plant manager, a machine operator, it's like, how can we talk about reducing downtime and, increasing throughput and maximizing OEE and things that are actually important to them on the shop floor. So I think we got to get to the bottom of what matters to them and not just do it by making assumptions. But I think like we're big advocates of conducting customer interviews, talking directly to the people who look like your best customers, and so that we could try to replicate them and talking to the people in those organizations who are those most essential influencers in the buying process.
In one of our earliest episodes, we had a conversation with Adam Kimmel, who's a fractional industrial content manager, and he had a little anecdote that said basically when he starts talking with engineers and they understand that he's an engineer as well, the tensions cool down and people start trusting him more because they feel like they're talking to one of their own, which is the biggest reason why you need to turn to your experts internally. They are the ones that understand what your customers want. And you can't have marketers just running around creating fluffy content for SEO. You need to get these experts into your content process. I know Gorilla is very keen on that. So tell us more about your process and like why these industrial companies need to not hesitate to elevate their subject matter experts. Don't bury them in the in the basement. Put them on a pedestal. Give them a voice. Give them a platform and a chance to talk directly to the customers.
Yeah. This is a really important point, I think. I saw a lot more of this a decade ago where it was, we know we need to do content marketing. People coming to me and saying, we know we need to do content marketing and we need to be ranking in Google. And so, let's create a bunch of content focused on these keywords. And I think it's always a problem when you're just thinking about like the tactical thing you're going to do to, improve your Google rankings or get more eyes on you, because if there's no substance behind the content you're creating to get in front of somebody, people are going to see right through it and they're just going to turn the other direction and walk away. Like it doesn't matter if your content is ranking first in a Google search and driving, 1,000 visitors a month to your website. If when somebody actually stops to read it, to vet you and see if you know what you're talking about and if you're helpful, if it's trash, that not only is not helpful, in a lot of ways it's damaging, I think, to your brand reputation, and it makes you feel like a cheap solution to what's really important to the person who's consuming that content. So I think what you said, Selim, is 100% true. You need to, if you are out there educating your audience, if you're truly being that best media company for the people you need to reach, it needs to be helpful to them. It needs to help solve their problems, address the questions they commonly have, help them think differently about what they're trying to achieve and ways to get there. That's how you become an expert. And a lot of manufacturers seem to do this well in the sales process. They've got, salespeople who know how to conduct a consultative sale. They go in and they diagnose a problem. They walk around a manufacturing facility and they see all kinds of things that they know they can advise on. And it's that exact same thing that needs to come out in your marketing content. Now, the only difference here is you're doing this at scale, publishing things that are going to be consumed at scale digitally in most cases, ahead of those sales conversations to expose you and your expertise to more of the right people, and frankly, to set up much warmer sales conversations. Like I look at what leads look like for Gorilla, for ourselves 5 years ago, and it was people who found us through a Google search for something like manufacturing marketing agency, industrial marketing, things like that. They probably found their way very quickly to the contact us page on our website, filled out a form, and I would go into HubSpot and I'd look at it's one of my little triggers when I get a inbound consultation request is I just look at what have they consumed on my website. And it was a lot of like, land on the homepage, go to the contact form, fill it out. This person has spent probably 30 seconds with my company. That's how much they know about me. And think about what the quality of that sales conversation looks like versus now when I get a form fill and I go look at what they've looked at and I see they've been to my site 30 times over the last 2 years. And in the form fill, they not only, have they visited 50 pages on my site multiple times, but they say things like, I've been listening to your podcast for the last 2 years and now we're ready for an agency and let's talk, or we've been attending your industrial marketing live sessions, or we follow Grace Wright and Brendan Forrest on LinkedIn and everything they say is really resonating and we'd like to have a conversation. It's a completely different situation. So I think, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but like that's kind of what is at the core of this.
Well, let's talk about like, because this is probably the core of what prevents you from scaling when you choose not to do this. What is the challenge for companies to understand this concept of using their experts outside of the sales process and its importance? Because when I first started understanding, they ask you answer and inbound and how to provide value at scale, I thought that subject matter expertise was going to be the limiting factor. Because you do need a lot of experience, a lot of know-how, like to really be able to speak as an expert. That was not the case. And there are subject matter experts everywhere. There is content that they have been creating everywhere in terms of like going to shows and doing technical talks and, not recording any of it, not taking care of the slides. It's there. Why do they what is the challenge, or what have you seen as far as like the disconnect between, hey, like if you understand that some of these other points are making, that the buyer has control, the sales process actually starts online now and they're doing research. So just like we need you during the sales process, but we need you during the marketing process too. What is the challenge you've seen for understanding and maybe prioritizing this time for SMEs?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest problem is that the leader of the company doesn't understand marketing, or they don't see the value and they're not the ones saying, hey, company, this matters, this is important, and this is why. So I think a lot of it stems from leadership and the mindset of leadership. I've worked with a lot of manufacturing organizations over the years, and the ones that tend to fail are the ones where the leader sits in the background. They never showed up for the discovery workshop that we kicked off the engagement with, or they're there but then they disappear and are never willing to be a part of this again. It kind of just shows me the mindset of marketing versus the ones who are active. They show up for quarterly reviews, they ask good questions, they take to-dos afterwards in terms of, just being an advocate inside the organization. So I think leadership is part of it. And I also think aside from that, the other thing is just siloed departments where you have marketing and sales not in alignment with each other, and maybe engineering or the product team also not in alignment with marketing. So you may, if they're not really, if the engineers who are the subject matter experts inside your organization don't understand like how we're going to market and why it's what's in their brain that matters, they're not going to want to go give you their time. Like they've got a job to do. They weren't hired to do marketing. They're looking at you saying like, no, that's your job. You go figure that out. And I think in most cases, what I find is it doesn't mean like you need 20% of your engineer's time or even 5% of it dedicated to marketing. It may be that we're going to create 10 really great pieces of content this year that answer the most important questions our customers have. And among across those 10 pieces of content, we're going to lean on these 5 subject matter experts. So I need a couple hours of each of their time this year. And that might be it. Like that's, that might be bare minimum, but like, we've had those scenarios and it can work fine, but everybody needs to understand the strategy. And I think that points back to leadership.
Do you see that in these cases where you're only taking like 2 hours a year with these teams, does it unlock more appetite to creating more content at a bigger cadence, or do you feel like it just like fulfills the purpose and then, okay, see you next year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think every situation is different, but I do think that if the person conducting that interview with your subject matter expert, or once you put them on camera, like if you can really do a good job building confidence with them, that like you're asking the right questions of them to pull the right insights out of their brain, and then you can translate that into something and publish it, and they can see, there's my expertise published. It's there on the website in the form of written content or video or whatever it is. And then they can start to see the impact it's having. Like, I think it's a slow process of sort of building advocacy with those people, or helping them understand it. But I think it needs to start with those individuals understanding what the strategy is and why we're doing this, as opposed to just, hey, can we book 30 minutes so I can talk to you about this topic? Like, I think they need to understand what role it's going to play and why it's worth their time, and why, you don't want to talk to them at a first grade level just because you're not an engineer like they are. Like, we need to talk as if we're talking to the people that they interface with every day on their customers' ends, because that's who this content's being designed for. So yeah, I think it just kind of varies from one situation to the next, but once you get the ball rolling and these technical subject matter experts can see their content out there and having impact, it can really change the mindset.
Yeah, and when it clicks, it's a beautiful thing, because these are really smart people usually.
Yeah.
And once they see it happen, like, they don't need to be told twice, right? And especially when it comes to LinkedIn engagement, or, walking into a new facility and the person already knows your name because they've been watching your videos, there's like no other way to do that, besides doing some video content and putting yourself out there. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of I'm hoping it leads to number 5, which is capture demand, where it already exists. And this is something I think that's in the midst of being kind of, blown up a little bit right now. Often you might implement like Google Ads or something to try and capture some demand. But I'm hoping you can shed some light on, where we're at with this, and the advent of AI, and you have generative AI results like happening. Google's getting rid of cookies. A bunch of data is showing that value of that, that spend on Google Ads is not being returned like it once was. But it's really hard to turn that cash faucet off. So take us through like what it really means, and not just from a like, that's why we pay for the Google Ads.
Yeah. I'll talk about it the best I can here. I'm admittedly no deep expert in Google, whether we're talking about SEO or organic or pay-per-click. Others on my team are, and would probably be more qualified to answer this question in more detail. But what I can say is, when we talk about capturing demand where it already exists, I think that the most important point we talk about is that when you think about everybody that you could do business with, the right future customers for you, probably very few of them are actively looking for a solution right now. They're probably not. It's probably no more than, for many of you, 1 to 5% of them are going to Google this week or even this month and looking for a better solution that happens to be the thing you sell. That happens when they're triggered because they have a piece of machinery that's reaching end of life, or they're opening a new manufacturing facility, or their current vendor has dropped the ball. People tend to stick with what they've got if it's working, or there's something that triggers them, and those triggers may not happen more than once a year or every 5 years or more, depending on what the thing is. And I think I just see that so many companies making the mistake of just, it's like when we talk about marketing, when I talk about marketing with a new prospect, it's like we're talking about Google and we're talking about marketing as if those are the same thing, as if like that's what marketing is. It's winning in Google, and again, it's only a small percentage of your audience is even going to Google, because only a small percentage of your audience has a need right now. Like the rest of your audience will get there, maybe in a week or a month or a year or 5 years. But where we really need to focus a lot of the energy is on, how do we get out in front of the other 95 to 99% of your audience now and tomorrow and next week and the next month, and help them understand what they don't know about your product category, about your product, answer the questions they've got, address the help them figure out how to get to solutions they're trying to get to. It's all the content marketing stuff we've been talking about. We need to figure out how do we get out in front of a bigger percentage of your audience at scale. And yes, the people who are out there looking for a solution, we need them to find you, of course. But when you put all your eggs in that basket, you're probably ignoring 95% or more of your audience. As far as how the capture existing demand is changing, I think I think there are a lot of question marks right now about how AI, generative AI, like this, as if there's not enough content out there right now. It's just going to be continuing to grow exponentially, which is going to make there's that much more to compete against, which is challenging from a search perspective. It also, I think, creates opportunity for the companies who are making good content to really stand out. But that's kind of a different topic. So I'll pause there and see if I'm answering your question.
I'm interested in, we're talking about capturing demand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, and by extension Gorilla, make a distinction between lead generation and demand capture? And if so, I'm interested in your thoughts around the typical lead generation activities, such as buying lists and doing cold email, cold calls, and how much of that are you seeing, and does it affect your strategies?
Yeah, I would define lead generation and demand capture differently for sure. Demand capture is about, that small percentage of your audience that needs something now, making sure that they find you and that you capture that demand. Frankly, you expose yourself to them and open the door to sales conversations, so that you could be the solution provider to them. I think lead generation refers more to how do we collect names and email addresses and phone numbers of anybody who fits the demographic, firmographic profile of our ideal customer, which could happen in a lot of ways. It could be we buy a list from Zoom Info. It could be we gate content behind like white papers and ebooks and stuff on our website and make people trade their contact information for it. It could mean prospecting through Sales Navigator on LinkedIn or whatever. Generally speaking, I don't want to make blanket statements here like lead generation is bad, but generally speaking,
I'll do that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to argue with it on it. I think that I think that a lot of the activities that we would probably all classify as lead generation are things that it probably worked pretty well 10 years ago when there was, when the amount of people that were doing it then versus now was 1% and, of what it is now. And there weren't, getting an email address was not necessarily an easy thing to do 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And now there's like 1,000 different pieces of software you could buy, or 1,000 different, prospecting companies you could hire who are just using all that same software to do the work for you. And so, the result of this is what I described earlier on, where we're just being bombarded by people whose name is spam risk, right? It's just, there's so nobody wants to hear from you. Like nobody wants this. We're getting too much of this. And if you're going to go out and deploy that same tactic, you can probably expect the same sort of responses that, you give other people when they're doing it to you. So lead generation, are there ways to do it right? Yeah, sure. I think there are, but I think it's a lot harder to do. And I think it's hard to do it in a way that frankly doesn't piss off your audience.
Yeah, it's definitely getting harder and harder at the very least. And the amount of energy it takes to do it well, if you put a quarter of that energy into like, engaging the rest of your audience, creating demand on that side, it just goes so much farther. Because the beauty of it is you can like just skip over Google sometimes. Like they
Yeah.
don't have to stumble upon you anymore. They don't have to find you. They know exactly where you are and they will reach out to you. And that's what's, when you put the energy of talking to the rest of your audience, that's what happens. And there's so much data to show that. There was a great post, today from MJ Peters about like the CEO, like being active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And she's starting to see, real data that shows CEO posts more qualified pipeline happens.
Yeah.
And obviously, this doesn't mean he's posting like about his day-to-day life. And like he's just not doing random stuff as CEO. And it's not because his title is CEO this is happening. There's a strategy behind it. There's a right way and a wrong way to do all this stuff. But that's where the audience is now. And it's, for me, it's not unlike, you go to the trade show and not everybody that walks by is in the market. But there are some valuable conversations and valuable relationships started at that point. And if you can just wrap your mind around, LinkedIn is like a 24/7, 365 trade show. It's at least that's gotten to click, for some people. So like, can you just share a couple of your experiences? I'm sure there's many. I've definitely looked up to you for a long time. Your podcast has been educating me since it began. And I think you're at like 150, 200 episodes or something like that now. What have you learned, through that process to really like confirm that, that is one of the highest value activities you have as a leader of sales and marketing for Gorilla?
Yeah, so I appreciate you saying that, first of all. But I think that for people like us, Chris and Selim, it's kind of obvious, right? That like what we need to do to build brand awareness, to build trust in front of an audience, and we know because we've all experienced it, like the impact that has over time. I think the missing ingredient for most companies is just the patience to do it. And also, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it play out, it's hard to have trust that it will. And frankly, there's so much bad execution out there that if you're not executing soundly, that an initiative can fail. I think what's appealing to people about lead generation, just to come back to that real quick, is if I do this thing and then I get a name and I get an email address, there's something physical there for me that now my sales team can do. Even if that person has zero intent of buying anything soon, even if they're never going to pick up the phone or answer your email, like you have a physical thing versus we're going to publish a podcast episode every week for the next 52 weeks and know that as the audience grows from 10 listeners to 500 weekly listeners, that and we know we're in front of the right people, that good things will follow. That's a harder thing for companies to wrap their head around and to feel like, I can trust that's going to play out, because it takes time, and the thing you get back is not a physical name and an email address necessarily. But what I can tell you is that I kind of hit a little bit on this earlier. I mean, if I went into our CRM and HubSpot and looked at the source of our leads for Gorilla, like the people are filling out, I shouldn't use that word because it's a dirty word, right? But like the source of the actual human beings reaching out to us that are asking for a sales conversation, they were almost all organic search and maybe referral. This person referred me to you, whatever, a few years ago, and now almost everyone is coming from either LinkedIn, organic or paid, or podcasts. They reference that. We followed, the Refined Labs playbook of like, just ask the stupid question, how did you hear about us in your forum, and pair that with that qualitative input with the quantitative data that's in your CRM. And it's very clear that like not only are 90% of our qualified leads referencing the podcast or Industrial Marketing Live or LinkedIn, which is where we spend almost all of our marketing time in one of those places. But they're the ones that are the most engaged sales conversations. They're the ones that close at a faster rate, at a bigger deal size, that become our best customers, because they believe, they understand the philosophy, they understand our methodology, they're on board with it, they probably engaged others in their organization. So it couldn't be more obvious to me that, like, if we shut down Industrial Marketing Live and now the 3 podcasts we have, and stopped the 10 people on my team who post stuff almost daily on LinkedIn, just educating our audience, if all that just stopped and we instead started, downloading lists from Zoom Info and blasting emails at people, like, I guarantee you our business would tank, and we would probably be laying people off within 6 months, and we wouldn't surprise us if we were out of business in a year or two. So, like, it couldn't be more obvious to me, because I've seen all this play out. But it didn't take it didn't take 6 months. It took like 4 or 5 years of starting and being consistent, and then layering on something else when we were ready to layer on something else, and being consistent with that, and killing this thing because we did give it a year and it just isn't doing what we thought it was going to do. So it's a journey for sure, and you're not going to do it all at once, but you got to start with something, and then you got to be consistent with it.
What does it take for a leader that's watching all these lead gen channels start drying up, and their current sales motions start slowing down, and they get proposals of, okay, you should do demand generation on LinkedIn, subject matter expertise on LinkedIn, etc. What does it take for them to cross over that challenge and give resources to such programs for at least 6 months, and not just say we need help now, not in 6 months, and just not do it? Like, where how much pain do they need to feel until they are comfortable making that move? Because for us it's very obvious, but I understand that for them it's an unknown.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's no canned answer to it, but I think if I had to answer it directly, I think the pain has to be deep enough. I think there's enough companies we talk to that are doing fine. They, but maybe they're looking at how do we get to the next level. I think I always raise a red flag when I sense a panic situation. Like, if we don't hit this sales number by this date, we could be closing our doors, or like, we have a private equity firm breathing down our neck that needs to get us to this level of sales because they're trying to sell us next year, and like, we need to get there on this timeline. Those are the situations that are always red flags for me, because you wind up taking direction from the client, like as an agency, us taking direction from the client and doing things we don't even believe in, and naturally nobody winds up happy in the end. So I think one thing I'm always clear about, and I think anybody listening could take this advice, whether you're an agency yourself or you're an in-house marketer at a manufacturing or other type of organization, I think like setting very realistic expectations about what sorts of results you could expect by when is just so important. I think we did a really bad job at this at Gorilla as recently as 2 to 3 years ago. I think only in the last couple of years have we really started in those earliest sales conversations. Like, I want to talk to people, to organizations, and make sure they understand that this is not a quick fix. This is not going to change your business in 3 or even 6 months. It's going to take time to play out. And also, like, something we've built out for ourselves that we use with our clients and ahead of them signing a contract with us is we have what we call like a measurement and reporting story, where we explain when we launch a program, first of all, we got to there's like positioning work to be done. We got to get the message right for the right people, or none of this is going to work anyway. We got to have some content to support it. But once we start campaigning in front of tens of thousands of the right people, the first couple months of campaigning, you shouldn't expect any leads. You should expect that we're going to be validating whether, if we're trying to reach 50,000 people that fit your ideal customer profile, are we actually reaching at least 10,000 of them, maybe 20% or whatever we determine is a reasonable amount to be in front of 5-10 times a month. Is that actually happening? Or are we only reaching 10%? And if so, is our audience segmentation broken? Should we be refining that more? Is there somebody we're excluding? Are we targeting some of the wrong people? Is the message landing? Like, if we're running video, 2-minute video clips of one of our subject matter experts doing product comparison or product education or whatever, are people watching that video for 6 seconds and dropping off? Or are they watching it for 90 seconds, which tells me the message is engaging, it's landing with them. So there's lots of signals like that. And so if you can validate we're reaching the right people and the message is resonating over the first couple months of running campaigns, then you can start to feel confident that probably by month 3 and 4, some of those people are going to start to turn into leads. And now now we're looking at, are we generating actual leads? Are they qualified? Are they the right people from the right companies that are looking for the right things? A couple months after that, are those leads converting into pipeline? Are we actually quoting business with these people? And is it the low margin, one-off stuff, or is it the flagship stuff that we've really set out to try to educate around and sell? And then at some point, maybe depending on your sales cycle, between months 6 and 12, you should start to see revenue impact. Different for a company with a 1-month sales cycle versus an 18-month sales cycle, of course, but you kind of get the idea. And so I think setting those expectations early on and making sure leadership understands that, and like they can shake your hand and say, I agree, like this makes sense. You got to have that, or else it's going to be month 3 or 4 and they're going to be saying, where's the revenue? There's nothing happening for this program. And then you're looking at the data and saying, well, no. Like, we're reaching 10,000 people every single month and we're starting to see engagement and we've generated these leads, and no, they haven't closed yet, but this is exactly where we said we were going to be. And maybe even we're further along. So if you're not aligned on what you should expect to see by when, and if you can't get the leadership aligned around that, you can almost guarantee you're going to have some kind of problem. So that's kind of my long-winded answer to your question, Selim.
Yeah. And I think that's like another point where leadership this is not some like new flashy campaign activity that somebody else can do. Leadership has to be engaged and has to understand what's happening, because they need to kind of take that baton, from the agency or from the internal marketer, and then lead the communication around what you're trying to do with this change about expertise and how we do value, demand capture, all of this stuff, because it's really a change throughout the organization. And, I'll invite people to check this article out. There's some of that at the end too, especially, communicating with sales for really the whole organization from a customer facing perspective is and should be, impacted by this. But we want to wrap soon. But before we do that, we're really excited about, we're all committed to education here and helping this industry, move forward. And it's really exciting to see you guys kind of lead the way from we're talking a lot about digital stuff here. That doesn't mean we are forgetting about the in-person physical stuff. And the Industrial Marketing Summit coming up soon. Really excited to see that. Can you just tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up today?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you offering a chance to talk about it. But so last year at Content Marketing World in Cleveland, which is a content marketing event for really anybody, there was a track that was specifically for industrial marketers, and Adam Beck and Cadinus Part Solutions kind of were the ones who got that off the ground, and they've been doing it for a couple of years. And Adam and me, and then Wendy Covey, who is the CEO or founder of True Marketing, a marketing agency for kind of manufacturing engineers. We were just talking one night at the event. We're like, we should be just doing this on our own. We can run it our own way. We can get more people on stage. We can build more events around it. We do it for 2 days. And so we just ran with it. We said, all right, we're doing it. We're going to break this off and do it as its own thing, as a standalone event. And so our 3 companies, Cadena Smart Solutions, Gorilla, and True, are putting on the Industrial Marketing Summit in, I guess, your hometown, right, Chris, of Austin. Or are you in Houston? I always forget.
Yeah, Houston, but that's
Houston.
close
Okay.
enough.
Close enough, not too far a drive at least. But anyway, so we're putting this on in Austin, January 31st to February 2nd. We've got a speaker lineup for day 1 of, I think, 10 speakers. There'll be kind of 2 rooms going at once for some of the time, and then 1 big room for some of the speakers. Day 2, we're going to have 2 breakout sessions going on that will go much more in depth, be a little more interactive. But man, we're going to be covering all kinds of topics from generative AI and how that's impacting industrial marketing, to product marketing, to marketing sales alignment, to building a reporting story, measuring, really kind of a full gamut of stuff. And it's all designed specifically for industrial marketers. And then we're running some social events around it too in the evenings, just to kind of bring together a lot of people who seem to know each other digitally and have never been in a room with each other. So that's something I'm really excited about. There's probably 50 people attending this event that I know, but have never physically been in a space with. And I think that's going to be really, really cool. So I'm super excited.
Joe, thank you so much for being our guest today. And for anyone who's listening, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so unfortunately, my name's Joe Sullivan, so there's like 10,000 of me probably on the LinkedIn alone. But Joe Sullivan, Gorilla76. You can go to gorilla76.com to learn more about what we're doing. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. Happy to answer questions if anybody has any follow-ups to what we talked about today. But that's probably where I'd direct you. So I really appreciate the opportunity, guys. It was good talking to you, and congrats on what you guys have been able to do so far with your own business.
Thank you, Joe. And once again, for everybody who's listening, thank you for being with us, and looking forward to see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you.